How many of you have ever wanted to walk in the footsteps of Jesus? Well, today we get to do that together as we travel to Jerusalem and the temple courts. Stay tuned. Shalom, and thanks again for joining us for this teaching about Jesus, actually. And today, guys, we get to go to Jerusalem. I know we've been there before if you followed our teaching and our sessions in the past, but today we're going to continue to talk about Jesus and his ministry there. In fact, he takes sort of advantage, if you will, in a good way, of course, of a cultural thing going on called the Water Libation Festival. It actually took place in Jerusalem during the festival of Sukkot. We'll unfold some of these details as we take a look at the text of John 7 and as we travel to the temple courts in Jerusalem. By the way, if you want to be informed of new teachings that we produce here on this channel, of course, you know the drill probably by now. Just subscribe to us and make sure you hit the bell as well so that we can be of service and of ministry to you and offer our teachings in the near future. So let's take a look at John 7 together from Jerusalem. Going to Jerusalem is always a highlight in Israel. Jerusalem is today's capital of the country of Israel. It was the ancient capital as well, and our story takes place right there in the heart of the hill country of Judah in Israel's capital, Jerusalem. Our story actually comes from John 7, and it's a very interesting story culturally speaking, and we'll illustrate this as we unfold this story of Jesus in Jerusalem. By the way, in the context of Jesus in Jerusalem, during the course of his ministry, he probably goes to Jerusalem 5 times, and of course most of the book of John is written with him there. Here is the location of Jerusalem, and we'll try to fly in and over this city through this Google Earth map. But Jerusalem was significant to every Jew, and certainly as we see the old city now and the definitions of Jerusalem defined by the Turkish walls that date to 1537 AD, we can even see the Temple Mount in this aerial picture. But we're talking about ancient Jerusalem. This is what today's old city looks like. 2.8 miles in circumference is the size of the old city today. And these walls are not very old, relatively speaking. The Mount of Olives is to the east, and we're talking about an area of the city of David and the Pool of Siloam to the south here. It's still not visible for us, but here from the south we can again see the old city walls, including things like the Holy Sepulchre Church, the Dome of the Rock on top of the Temple Mount today. This is the area of Old Testament Jerusalem, and yet all of this was inside the city that Jesus knew. Here's a model of that city. This is from west looking east, which means the Dead Sea is on the top of the picture, to the east, about 18 miles away. The Judean desert, here's the Mount of Olives, the Temple Mount, and the 2 valleys that define Jerusalem, the Hinnom Valley in the south, in the Kidron Valley to the east. And the Pool of Siloam here is at the southern end of the city. Now this picture is of the Temple Mount looking east to west, which means this is the temple courts And, of course, this has a significant role in the story of John 7 as well. So, this is a great model, and understand that this Temple Mount was expanded by Herod the Great in 20 BC. In fact, the green stone here, of course, they're not green today in color, but through this illustration, we can see how much larger Herod expanded this temple platform by building these retaining walls on all four sides, in proximity to the size of Solomon's temple, illustrated by the yellow. Keep this in mind because it was on the temple courts up here where we will read our story. And Jesus, of course, we place him up here somewhere on the top of the temple court, maybe in the royal stoa, perhaps in Solomon's portico. That's mentioned in John 10 and Acts 3 and Acts 5 later on. Here on the western side, we have different entrances called Robinson's Arch, Wilson's Arch. Here's one that's called Barclay's Gate, all after the early 19th century explorers who identified these archaeological discoveries. The southern steps, Jesus would have used the southern steps himself and not this archway that was reserved for dignitaries. But this is the temple that we're talking about, and Jesus is here, as I mentioned, at least 5 times after he begins his ministry. He would have walked on stone pavements like this here on the west side. And the story involves the Pool of Siloam down here to the south. There's also a story from John 9 illustrated, and of course it includes the pool as well, but we're going to share a story from John 7. So notice the proximity between the pool and the Temple Mount. In fact, there's a Herodian pavement that has been discovered now all the way back north to the temple, and we're going to be seeing some of that shortly. Keep in mind that this particular Herodian street was used by the high priest in what was called the Water Libation Festival. He would have taken a gold pitcher, as illustrated here, down from the temple during each day of the festival of Sukkot, or Tabernacles. This is the pavement that was newly discovered, still not open to the public, at least at the time of this recording. We're hoping that it will be open to us shortly. The Pool of Siloam being excavated about 10 years ago or so, and you can see just portions of the steps of the pool. This is what the pool looks like today, the very steps dating 2,000 years old. And keep this in mind, this is part of the story of John 7 and the cultural element of the Water Libation Festival. In fact, here's a great picture of how it was celebrated. The priest, with great fanfare, with the blowings of the trumpets, would take a golden pitcher, and in the fall, he would hopefully scoop up some of the early rainwater from the pool that gathered here. All of this is recorded, by the way, in the Mishnah for us in great detail. He would return with this golden pitcher, now filled with water, and he would pour it on a bowl, as I understand, positioned on one of the corners of the altar. In fact, let's see if this can play here for us. This is a reenactment from 2014, October, where the Temple Institute people, who are actually preparing for the building of the third temple, reenact this ancient ritual of scooping water from the Pool of Siloam. Again, the first time it's been done in 2,000 years. He would then take the water up to near the temple. Of course, they can't do it today because the Temple Mount is sort of off limits. But here they would reenact the pouring of the water into a bowl. And all of this is context for the story of John 7. It's really a remarkable reenactment of the event that took place in the days of Jesus. So when we move to our story, Jesus is in the temple. He would have entered through the southern gates called the Hulda gates. Here you can see the royal stoa on top on the southern end. The steps, as seen here in this illustration, thanks to Leon Rittmeyer, Jesus would have entered into the temple by going through this sort of underground walkway, and then would have come up into the court of the Gentiles, would have conversed, I'm sure, with religious leaders in the royal stoa. This was what Jesus did. He talked about the kingdom and other issues of religious life. But the high priest would, from the temple courts, take this golden pitcher, and as I mentioned, every day during the festival of Sukkot, he would leave the temple with this pitcher in hand from the courtyard, this court of the women, marked with the four menorahs, or the candelabras, I should say, the 15 Levitical steps. And here's another illustration by Dr. Rittmeyer of this area. So, picture Jesus perhaps here with the high priest. Jesus did not arrive, according to John 7, verse 14, until halfway through this Feast of Sukkot, but he did go to the temple courts and began to teach. The Jews were amazed and asked, how did this man get such learning without having studied? Jesus answered, my teaching is not my own. It comes from him who sent me. If anyone chooses to do God's will, he will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. He who speaks on his own does so to gain honor for himself, but he who works for the honor of the one who sent him is a man of truth. There is nothing false about him. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet not one of you keeps the law. Why are you trying to kill me? You are demon-possessed, the crowd answered. Who is trying to kill you? Jesus said to them, I did one miracle, and you were all astonished. Yet because Moses gave you circumcision, though actually it did not come from Moses, but from the patriarchs, you circumcise a child on the Sabbath. Now if a child can be circumcised on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses may not be broken, why are you angry with me for healing the whole man on the Sabbath? Stop judging by mere appearances and make the right judgment. At that point, some of the people of Jerusalem began to ask, isn't this the man they are trying to kill? Here he is, speaking publicly, and they are not saying a word to him. Have the authorities really concluded that he is the Christ? But we know where this man is from. When the Christ comes, no one will know where he is from. Then Jesus, still teaching in the temple courts, cried out, yes, you know me, and you know where I am from. I am not here on my own, but he who sent me is true. You do not know him, but I know him, because I am from him, and he sent me. At this they tried to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him, because his time had not yet come. Still many in the crowd put their faith in him. They said, when the Christ comes, will he do more miraculous signs than this man? The Pharisees heard the crowd whispering such things about him. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees sent temple guards to arrest him. Jesus said, I am with you for only a short time, and then I go to the one who sent me. You will look for me, but you will not find me, and where I am, you cannot come. The Jews said to one another, where does this man intend to go that we cannot find him? Will he go where our people live, scattered among the Greeks, and teach the Greeks? What did he mean when he said, "You will look for me, but you will not find me, and where I am, you cannot come"? And now verse 37, on the last and greatest day of the feast. This is when the priest again would take the golden pitcher to the pool of Siloam. Jesus now stood and said in a large voice, "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the Scripture has said, streams of living water will flow from within him." By this he meant the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were later to receive. Up to that point, the Spirit had not been given, since Jesus had not yet been glorified. On hearing his words, some of the people said, "Surely this man is the prophet." Others said, "He is the Christ." Still others asked, "How can the Christ come from Galilee? Does not the Scripture say that the Christ will come from David's family and from Bethlehem, the town where David lived?" Thus the people were divided because of Jesus. You see, Jesus takes advantage of this water libation festival, and when the water is poured out in the temple courts, Jesus says, "I am the living water. Any of you who are thirsty, let him come to me and drink." And Jesus, in the temple courts, is identified by at least some as the Messiah. It's a great picture, using this cultural element of the water libation festival to realize that Jesus is still today for us our living water. So let's hear these words from Jesus once again. "If anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the Scripture has said, streams of living water will flow from within him." These are the words that Jesus shared boldly, I might add, in the context of the temple courts where this water libation festival was coming to an end, and Jesus shares these very important words. I don't know where you are in your own spiritual faith walk with God, but I know that we all experience dry moments or dry seasons of life where we need to thirst after Jesus. Only in him can we have our thirst quenched, because Jesus is the only one who provides us spiritual fulfillment. And that's what he does. He still does it, as he did 2,000 years ago. When we find ourselves dry and thirsty, we can still come to him and find fulfillment and joy in a personal relationship with him. So this is our story from John 7 about Jesus and his ministry in Jerusalem. Join us for another teaching as we share this teaching channel with you. And we're so glad and thrilled that you're joining us. And we hope that you are having a great day. And may God bless you in special ways. Until next time, shalom.